All right. So I'm Catherine Keaton, and I'm here with Priscilla Ardoin. Very lucky to have her as a guest for us to be able to chat today. So just thank you for being here, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
As we kind of had talked before this interview, the inception and the idea for this interview series that we're thinking of is really to connect with some of the women and men, just employees in general, that we're providing career and executive coaching services for, that seem to be dealing with a lot of issues, that they seek examples, they seek mentorship. They want to know how other people have been so successful in their own careers and lives. And so as I've reflected on this, you obviously came to mind because I think not only is your story inspiring, but you've had such a successful career. So I just kind of want to start and understanding, if we can kind of go back, when you were starting in college and earlier years, what was that initial path for you, and how did that set up for your first position or first job?
I have to pause from your question just a minute to say thank you so much for doing this. I think my career might have avoided a few pitfalls if I had had available to me exactly what you are doing now. So thank you so much for doing that. Okay. Gosh, it's a good thing that I haven't lost all my memory, because that start was so long ago. But I benefited from what was happening in the environment, and I say that because I entered the Bell system, which is what it was in the time back in 1976, and it was just shortly after a consent decree had been signed because of gender discrimination issues in the workplace. And so the company was looking to bring women into the workplace, and I was part of an experimental group that was brought directly into a management position, and we were given jobs that were traditionally held by male employees. Wow. So needless to say, while the company was committed to doing the right thing, really understood what needed to be done, and over the years did it very well, I think we all see, the entire environment was not totally ready for it at that time.
I can only imagine.
So there were some hurdles. You had to be committed to, this is my plan. I'm going to work my plan, and my plan is to be here right now and to do what it takes to make this work for me, because not everybody embraced you with open arms, even though there were a lot of support systems that were set up and so forth. So I think coming into a large, respected, wonderful business under circumstances like that made me realize something that perhaps under other circumstances I might not have realized, and that is that I've got a right for it to be about me in this instance. And this is what I want, and I want to be in this place at this time, and I want to make it work for me. And I needed that as an African American woman, as a person of color. Absolutely. And as a female. I needed that to work for me, because I needed to prove to myself as a young whippersnapper that I had something going for me other than just book smarts, as many people would want to say.
Yeah, of course. So I'm almost in awe just if you speak about that. Having that kind of foresight and looking out of that, in your situation with that perspective, I think in and of itself is pretty amazing. But so if you don't mind, I'd love to hear, when you talk about these barriers, having that mindset I'm sure helped, but how, what other things did you do to have to overcome these barriers, especially if you kind of entered into this management role? Were there things that really kind of stuck out to you?
Outside of having that personal resolve and having that commitment, I had to believe that the company wanted this to work. And that while there may have been individual actors that had not gotten on board yet, that there was a corporate commitment, and that there were executives, managers, and others in the business that wanted it to work. And I had to align myself with them. I had to believe it, and make that commitment. Ask a lot of questions, and I had to work really hard to learn a business that I didn't go in confident that I could do.
Mm-hmm. They were ready for that challenge. So, okay, what you said earlier, I want to touch on. You said that it was really important to network with individuals at the executive management level that were aligned with that commitment from the organization. So were you able to find those individuals? Did you get that support? Because I'm sure it was tested.
Well, I did get that support, and one of the reasons was because, again, the company knew what it was doing, and so it had certain avenues available to you that were open that might not otherwise have been open.
Sure,
it had
okay.
support structures built in that might not otherwise have been there. For its new management hires brought in under this arrangement at that time, they brought you together with facilitators so that you were invited to give your opinion, to talk about the environment, to say what's going on, and so forth. One of the things that I think also, you know, so much of success, I really believe, and I hate to say it, but so much of success sometimes is where you are and what's going on at the time that you are where you are. And I came through at a time when the management theory was employees taking responsibility for moving their careers forward. And so it wasn't that you felt you were stepping out of line if you spoke up and said, this is what I want to do. And so a part of that was letting people know, this is what I want to do. This is what I'd like to learn about. Oh, I read about this. I've not had any experience in that area of the business. So what would I have to do to be prepared to have some experiences there? Or what does my career look like going forward? You know, they'd ask, where do you want to be 5 years from now? Well, that's like me landing on the moon and saying, where would I like to be 5 years from now? I don't even know what's around the corner. So can I have lunch with you? Can we talk about what some of your experiences have been? And reaching out to people and inviting that kind of conversation was invaluable to me. And I was a lucky girl because so many people said yes.
Yeah. Well, I think you are lucky, but I think what things come very innate to you, most people don't do. So this proactiveness, being direct, asking for what you want, seeking out other people and being open and asking people for, you know, can you go to that lunch? Can you have that meeting? I think the tendency, especially with the people that I work with, isn't to necessarily have that mindset. And so, yes, I think it is luck, and I know it is when you're saying it is where you are, but I see it as you did a lot of very specific things too that put you in those opportunities, and that created those opportunities for you.
And you tapped into something that I feel was very important for me, and it's something that I share with others occasionally, and that is knowing where you are and where your center is. A lot of times we can come out of school, college, one job, making a career transition, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
And especially as women, we feel that we have to put on the cloak of, I got this, I know this. You know, I'm going to march forward, be strong, be bold, all of those things are great. But a part of it is you've got to be really honest about who you are, where you are, and how you learn. And I'm a very Socratic learner. Lots of questions, lots of inquiry. I'm inquisitive by nature. And asking those questions, sitting in a meeting, I can remember, and hearing people talk about things and walking out of that meeting, I made it a habit very early on. I mean, my second year working, I made it a habit of walking out of a meeting. I had a stenographer's notebook, and I'd go in and I would write down the topics that I heard in that meeting that I didn't fully understand, that were really cloudy to me. I do that with reading books still. I can't stand to see a word that I don't know the meaning of, so I always have something on the side and I jot that word down. I've got to look at it. I know what it is in context, but do I fully understand it? You know, so listening to people, really admiring, I really understood. He broke that down in a way that I can really understand what's happening to this business now and thoroughly what we're dealing with. And now I can get my ideas churning on how I can contribute and have more questions to ask.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you say that too, I love that it's putting yourself in a position of I do have this, I got this.
Yes.
But it's understanding that that's a continual learning mode. That it doesn't make you weak to be in a position to ask questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
being empowered enough to ask questions. Thinking about it as a sense of empowerment.
Exactly. It's actually a strength. Yeah. Okay, so how long were you at Bell? What was that trajectory?
It was my second professional job, and I was actually, once I got there, I never left.
Okay.
I didn't always intend it to be that way, but I was there almost 34 years.
I didn't even realize that. Okay, amazing. All right, so either talk about some of the promotions and positions you really enjoyed, or we'll wait until for the lawyer position too, and what made you want to go to law school. But.
Well, one of the positions I really enjoyed was the one, and one of the ones that was most pivotal actually in my career, was one that I absolutely did not want to take. By the time I went directly from undergraduate to graduate school, I had a 10-day break in between, and then I entered the job market. And so I just had this thirst for wanting to do well and so forth, but I was an analytic. By this time, I know I'm analytic. I have great synthesis skills, and my first exposure was really a staff position. My second exposure was a staff position, and now I have this opportunity for a great promotion, and it is a field position. And I suppose that's still relevant terminology,
for sure.
Staff and field.
Yes,
okay. And it was a field position, and I went 2 levels ahead to an executive that I had established a very good relationship with and said, listen, I don't want to do this. Can't you work this out? Can't you talk with someone so I don't have to do this? I mean, look, I've got a bachelor's degree, I've got a master's degree, I have proven myself, I'm great at analytics. I mean, here are all of the ways in which I can treat. You don't want me going out there working with a bunch of hairy-legged guys. I don't need to do this.
Yeah.
And the best advice he ever gave me, he said, you are extraordinarily talented and this business needs you. We're lucky to have you. I mean, I can't tell you how I felt being a young employee when he said that to me.
Wow.
He said, but this is something you have to do. He said, this is a business that will never respect you unless you earn your stripes. Go do this. You'll get it down in no time. And that position was what they called, I think it may have been an installation manager. I had a couple of garages with first-line supervisors reporting into me as a second-line supervisor, and each of those first-line supervisors had a crew of men working for them, and they were the people that did the fundamental work of the telephone business. They went into your homes and installed or repaired your telephones. Well, I'm not being euphemistic when I say it was a group of men reporting to the first-line supervisor. And oh, by the way, all of those first-line supervisors were men as well.
Okay.
And many of them, and we were in Texas, I was in Houston, and many of them had daughters older than I was, and many of them had, some of them, not, I won't say many, but certainly there were those that had a very Southern, uninspired mentality, and they didn't want to work for a child, and they did not want to work for a black child. And there were some challenges wrapped up. I actually had a gentleman who worked, who reported directly to me, a supervisor, a very brilliant man, who would not speak to me, and he wouldn't look at me. If you were talking with someone and I walked up, he would turn around and leave. And we had cubicles, and I heard him in his office say something that was the worst of worst racial slurs, so you know the one I'm talking about.
Sure.
And he said it loud enough so that he knew I would hear it.
Hear it.
But of course, it's like he's not saying it in my face or being belligerent. He's in his cubicle and so forth.
It's completely hostile.
Completely hostile. And I asked my assistant when she saw him get off his line to ask if he could visit with me in my office. And he came to the door, and I asked him to please come in and have a seat and close the door. And he said, what could I possibly have to speak with him about behind closed doors? And you know, there's so many things in my life that I call God things. They're just things that God does for me in my life. Because there's a part of me that wanted to. I'm certain a guttural reaction would have been quite different, but somehow I managed to say, it's clear to me that you don't like our working arrangement and you don't particularly like me, and that's not a requirement of the job. But right now you need to think about whether or not you dislike me more than you love your family and love providing for them. Because that's the deal you're going to have to make right now. If you want to continue taking care of them, please come in, close the door, and have a seat. And we had some frank discussion, but I will tell you.
So he came in.
He did.
In, yeah.
He came in. And we developed over time, we had a very frank discussion, but we developed over time a very good relationship. We became friends. He taught me about the business, the sheer craft and fundamentals of the business, more than I can tell you. And he went around calling himself a redneck in a white collar.
Okay.
But I think it was a matter of exposure.
Priscilla, I mean, that is just such a profound story. I mean, I have so many questions about that, but even at the basis, like, do you think that his major resistance was just the lack of exposure to a woman being in that position, to a black woman being into that position?
I think there was a big cultural divide. I think that, you know, his experiences did not contemplate what his reality was at that time.
And when you speak,
and he had not been prepared for that. He'd not been prepared for a woman boss. He'd not been prepared for an African American boss. He'd not been prepared for, you know, for any of for a person, you know, not his generation. Any of that. I even think now there are probably some generational things going over, and. It wasn't about me, and that's something that the more we're able to exist in business, if we're smart, the more we come to understand that the human resource is the really critical, core, essential factor that makes it work. And we are all so different. And our filters are different, our life scripts are different. And we bring all of that into a place, and now it has to function as a machine, as a team, as a unit, for the benefit of this business. And if you come into it with that, or if you grow into it, because I grew into it with that business frame of mind, it allows space for you all to come together. So his resentment wasn't of me. His limitation was of not anticipating me. Just think about being faced with a really difficult problem at work. I mean, just how flustered you get. What do? If you're an angry if you're a person that, you know, kind of gets angry, you go anger first. If you're a person that gets nervous first, you just go nervous first. If you're a person like me that eats, you just get hungry first. You know, and you have to go through those natural things before you settle into, now let me deal with this. Let me deal with this problem. And so that was just a different kind of business problem. And I had to be able to see it that way.
Exactly. Even in this beautiful story, though, and that's why I'm so excited about making videos like this and having conversations like this, because what you just laid out has, if people are watching this and unpacking it, in that situation, what you were just saying, you were able to remove yourself and objectify. He's not attacking me, he's upset about the situation.
Yes.
And so me as an effective manager, I'm going to come in and engage this in a mature but also professional way, and also not lash out and make it emotional in my repercussion. Because you could have very easily just had him fired or figured out a way to get rid of this person who was treating you so disrespectfully. But instead, you took a completely different road. And that is the kind of thing that makes the distinction between bad management and good management, and an effective working environment. And I mean, it sounds like on the other side of it, you learn so much from him.
An enormous amount.
Yeah.
An enormous amount. I have great respect for him.
That's an amazing story. Okay, all right.
So that was the job I didn't want to take.
Oh, okay,
but
I love it.
Outside of that one experience,
Okay.
I learned so much from that job. It was a field job, but it put me in touch with the true fundamentals of what our business was about. I understood what drove cost in the business. I understood how costs could be cut in the business. I understood the kinds of things that made a customer irate. I understood the various ways of delivering service to a customer, of how you had to manage a business when you were moving from one technology or one method of service to another method of service. And you're doing this with one of the largest corporations in the world, and your service as a service provider, you're providing service ubiquitously, and it was exciting. It was during that job when I understood. It was during that position when I understood that I was no longer in a job, that I was engaged in a career, that this was what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Yes. And I didn't come to it thinking that. I came to it thinking I'm out of college and these loans are going to kick in soon.
And I need to pay that off somehow.
Yes.
Exactly. Well,
I'm going to be too old for my parents' insurance real soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to get this going.
That time is ending. So translating that, I hear, and just people I work with too, that feedback of, I have work experience and even more importantly, education to be at this level.
Yes.
And I only see opportunity for these lower, more maybe filled positions. And I hear you saying that actually that type level is a really valuable experience and will give you perspectives of an organization you probably wouldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely. It was the, it probably was the most critical piece of my career, because it made me understand the business that I was in. Now again, I prided myself on being this terrific analytic. Most certainly I thought I was adding value before.
Sure.
But I didn't understand the whole of the business. I didn't understand the nuances of the business. I understood parts of it in the here and now, but I didn't understand the possibility of where it could go. I didn't understand the challenges of how do you move a ship that's critical to national security, to everyday lives. I mean, I'm a telephone lady, and at one time I didn't think that was sexy or wonderful, or it's like, okay, I'll take this job as a telephone lady, but I'm really not going to stay here doing this. But I say with great pride now when people say, well, what did you do with your career? I was a telephone lady, and I know what that means to me, but I didn't understand all of the real foundation of that business until I took that pivotal, key, second level job.
Okay, so and then from there, even you've kind of talked about mentors in your life. Maybe for some of these other positions, were there, what did a really good boss look like, and what was that experience, or maybe even on the other side for some of these later positions?
Yeah, you said, and then from there, that was a job I wanted to say no to.
Okay.
And my mentor said, this is yes, you're going to do this. And I said yes. And one of the things I learned from that is there's a lot of opportunity in saying yes. And I said yes a lot. And I recommend that. I recommend that particularly women in business say yes. Even if it's about something that we don't think suits us. Because you talk about mentors in the business, other bosses in the business, other executives in the business. They have challenges as well, and they're looking at the organization and they're identifying talent and they're assessing skill sets. They're finding gaps in the organization or opportunities in the organizations, new frontiers in the organization, and a part of their job is to make that match. So a part of it is to let the system work. If you're being recommended for this, nobody's suggesting you join their team and nobody is suggesting you move to that next position, whether it's a critical lateral or a promotion, because they think you're not going to do well there. I mean, businesses really can't afford to put you somewhere so you can fail.
I love it.
It's just sort of not the way we work.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to make good decisions.
They are trying to really make good decisions.
Yeah.
And so it's a part of this fabric that you are a part of. And so say yes to those opportunities. In my almost 34 years, I worked in network and technology. I worked in marketing. I worked in a sales-driven organization. I worked in strategic planning. I worked in regulatory and public affairs. I worked in, I guess I said sales, but I worked across the organization, and for a while it seemed to me, as soon as I got the hang of it and got really good at it and, eliminated perhaps problems that might have been a part of what I moved into, and we're all set and, we're putting high marks on the wall, there was an opportunity to say yes again.
Yeah, exactly.
But all of that helped build me into a really well-rounded industry professional, which I was able to, over time, understand that that's what I was becoming, that I was not a supervisor of this unit. If you think about it, when you'll ask someone, what is it that you'll do, their tendency is to give you their position or their title.
Yeah.
I was able to really tap into the transferable skills I was gaining, the new critical learning that I was gaining, the more developed thinking that I was able to do. And it made me feel like a more well-rounded professional. And no one is going to act with intentionality outside of their perception of their capability.
Exactly.
So if I didn't feel like a capable professional, that I'm understanding this, that I'm getting it, that these questions that I don't know the answer to are reasonable questions to ask because they get others thinking about them and so forth. Probably none of that would have happened, but all of that happened because of the opportunities that I was provided because of other executives in the system who made an offer and gave me an opportunity to say yes. Yeah. And it was always scary because you're leaving the people who you have earned the confidence of.
Sure.
And who look at you as their superstar. And that's a great thing.
Yes.
That's a great feeling. I realized I liked being the go-to person.
Yeah.
You know, I liked the fact that if something was happening, my boss could come to me and say, oh my God, I've just got a call, I got to be upstairs, and yada, 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 I need you to do this, this, and this. And I'd put it in his hands, and he'd read it on the way to the elevator going up. You know, it's not, you got to give it to me the night before, or go to someone else for that. I liked
to be that person.
I liked being, you know, that person. But that was skill building. That I didn't come there. So, you know, with all of that learning, with all of that knowledge, people taught me along the way and shared their knowledge and made themselves accessible to me.
Sure. And having those experiences.
And it taught me as an executive to do the same.
Yeah, exactly. And then you pay it forward and provide those experiences. I love, you know, with a lot of individuals that I coach, oftentimes it's this feeling of I'm supposed to have this straight and narrow path, and it's supposed to be this career. And I hit here, and then I move here, and then I move here. And what I hear you saying is the common thread should be these very important skill sets, you know, critical thinking, being able to be analytical or strategic, communication, you know, a good decision maker, an effective leader. And those skills are actually very useful and vital in all of these different areas, and actually getting experiences across this diverse range of departments within an organization
absolutely
made you a better employee, and made you a better manager, and made you a better leader, and then of course a better executive.
And a better person.
Yeah. Okay, so how does law school fit into all of this?
Well, law school was something I always wanted to do,
Really?
probably as a little girl of 12 years old.
Okay.
It was clearly nothing that I pursued with intentionality, or I would have done it right out of undergraduate. But I went straight from undergraduate to graduate school. And I got a master's in communications, which I really did enjoy. I am a lifelong learner, and nothing excites me. You probably heard I learned so much a lot, but nothing excites me more than learning. But I was, you know, probably mid-level executive, probably the top of mid-level executive.
Okay.
And it was during a time where companies were starting to cut back. It was a reflection of what was happening with the economy and taking advantage of new views of management, span of controls and things like that. And companies were downsizing, and that was happening a lot. One of the things that I've always been aware of, just innately, is I just ain't all that, okay? And if this is happening to a lot of people, a lot of smart people, I am grateful to say there, but by the grace of God go I. But it's not happening to me because I'm so smart. I'm too smart to be, you know, outsourced or downsized or any of that. This is a function of what's happening in business. And I thought I should probably put some things in my tool chest. It was also a time that my career had gotten what I felt was a little stagnant.
Okay.
I had hit, for me, what felt like the ceiling. Now, it wasn't the glass ceiling, it was still a way up. But I had hit a ceiling. I had moved, I had received good promotions, good movement, good opportunities, and so forth. But I had been in a spot for a while, and I felt that that shouldn't be. And I decided that I had two choices, or three choices. I could be real unhappy with this. I could just stay and feel nonchalant about it, or I could leave and do better elsewhere. I mean, quite frankly. And at that time, I reminded myself that you decided to stay here, and unless something has changed about why you made that fundamental decision, that this is still your company. So I opted that out, that I'm not leaving. So I could either stay and kind of be nonchalant, and I'm just not nonchalant by nature, or I could stay and be unhappy, and I don't do unhappy well.
None of the options.
And so I decided, what can I do to make this work for me better? And I thought, you know, I've got some time, I'll go to law school. I will invest in me. I'm not receiving the promotions at this point that I think I should and that I think I deserve. And as I had an opportunity to share with the CEO one time, it finally occurred to me that I'm not being promoted because I'm not doing all the right things. I'm doing my job. Respectfully speaking, sir, it's kind of you and some of your guys that aren't doing their jobs. So, I can't promote. So what can I do to continue to enhance myself?
Sure.
And I thought over a number of options, and I went back to the fact that the law was something I always had an interest in. It was something I always thought might be exciting. So I tried to get my husband to go. I did.
Did you really?
I did. I said, why don't you go to law school?
Yeah.
There's a study course going on. If you go take the study course, I'll go with you.
Yeah, I'll learn vicariously.
And I did.
Yeah.
And we went through, I think it may have been a 6-week study course or something in the evenings. And I thought,
I love this.
well, you've gone through the study course. Why don't you take the LSAT? I mean,
Might as
I'll
well.
take it with you. And we did. And then I thought, you should apply. You really should apply. Your scores are decent. You should apply. And so finally, that was when he was through indulging me, and he said, that's never been a part of my agenda. It's never been a part of anything I wanted to do. Why don't you apply?
Love it.
And so I went to law school, and I went part-time.
Okay.
I continued to work. Our boys were young, and that was the second time I'd gone to school with our young sons. I got an MBA. I went through an executive MBA program, married with children as well, and I enjoyed it. It caused me to be more focused at work, probably to run things a little bit tighter because
Absolutely.
of time and so forth. And it caused me to be more focused at home, and it made me more creative about how I could integrate the boys into it. At the time, our sons were 2 years apart, 25 months apart. So at the time, Evan was still in his room, and Aaron was still in his room, but we had a spare guest room. We needed the spare guest room because family came all the time. So I decided this would be a great time to move Evan in with his brother and have them, during these middle years, share a room with each other. And we turned what was Evan's room and had been his nursery into a study room.
I see.
And it was great because that's where I studied, that's where I worked. And and the boys would want your attention, but they had to come in and they had to do quiet things. And so they did tons of computer work, they did tons of reading, they would post their things up in the study room, and it became a thing in our house. Mom, is it time to go to the study room? We got to get this done. Are we going to be back in time to get to the study room? And, that kind of thing. So
you're even touching on issues of work-life balance,
Yes.
And that sounds like a beautiful way that you were able to make that work. And I love when you're talking about, keeping a tight shift. That I think so often people portray women trying to do a business and or having their professional life and their personal life and this family life and maybe going to school picking that it's not doable, and I think it is, and maybe it's my personal opinion, but it takes a different mindset, and I hear that's exactly what you're talking about.
And it was also related to, I thought it would also better prepare me for an area of the business that I was always interested in getting into. Now, it wasn't an area that you had to have a law degree to do, and that was the regulatory end of the business. The industry was pervasively regulated industry at the time, and I thought the law degree, having that, would help me in that area, and it certainly did.
Absolutely.
Something I always wanted to do, so I pursued it, but I mostly pursued it to fill the need I had in me, to feel like I was continuing to move forward professionally, because that was not moving as well as I wanted it to move at work. And I never had an intention of leaving work because by this time, I understood the plan I was under. I understood, the age I needed to be. I understood the investments, the company matches, and all of those things. And all that was a part of, what was working for our family and what we had been investing in as a family. And quite frankly, it was a part of the benefit of working for such a great company.
Sure.
That offered those kinds of things. But law school just clicked. When you refuse to be unhappy, when you refuse to feel like somebody else is in charge of your fulfillment, and when you take that responsibility, then you dig around and figure out, what does it take? I mean, I played Volvo Tennis League for a while. That was good for a while.
Yeah. Not law school.
But, in law school, it was very difficult. It was extremely stressful. It was costly, and I required a lot more help at home. But it made me focus on the two of the things that meant the most to me was my development as a professional, the way I felt about me, and it provided strategically the safety net that I thought we needed. Both my husband and I were employed by not only the same industry, but the same company. So not only could I have gotten downsized out, but he might have gotten as well. So it could have been one or the other, or it could have been both of us. Thank God it was neither of us, but it could have been. And so we had to be prepared for that. And being prepared keeps you from worrying about it. Being prepared keeps you from that empty, banal churn that just, as the Dixie Chick says, rings you out, strings you out, and adds years to your face. It made me feel it was productive. But that's a part of what I say. Things have to make sense to you. Exactly. Things have to be internally consistent and settled with you. I felt like I had a safety net. I felt like it was something I could do. I felt like it could contribute to my career. I always had an interest in it, and once I decide I'm going to do it, I know I can do it successfully.
And so I love what you're speaking to, because I think maybe it is that tennis for somebody else.
Yes.
And that is aligned with this, not only their personal resolve, but what makes them feel okay, what aligns with their needs and their wants and their desires, and making them feel not satisfied, but maybe more fulfilled is the right word, fulfilled as a person. But I hear also that this was strategic for you, and it had that foresight of, I'm protecting not only my professional career, but for my family, and what things I can't control for.
Yes.
Which I think is so important.
Evan went to legal research and writing with me. I think he could have been 10 or 11 years old. I took legal research and writing on, not legal research and writing, legal history. I took it on Saturday mornings, and he got up and went to class with me 80% of the time on Saturday mornings, as long as he didn't have a sports conflict or anything. He got to learn so much about the Constitution, about, the formation of the legal system and so forth. We could talk about it going home. He could form questions. I could ask him questions. I had to do a research paper, and I would set up in a study room in the library. And my research paper was on a member of, I had to search the congressional record a lot.
Okay.
And I taught him how to search the congressional record. I said, honey, you are surely the only 10-year around that can search the congressional record.
Yeah.
And he could search that congressional record. He would tear off a little yellow, pull one of those little yellow stickies, put it on the page, and they're big, and bring that big book and, sit it on the desk. And I would just go from, one to one, and then He'd help me take them back. You know, it was something that we could do together. But because I've had to admit to myself, not only did the financial circumstances of our family require us to be a two-income family, I'm certain that had it not, I would have needed it. Jim certainly knows, my husband certainly knows, that our household runs better because I had this outside challenge. As he told me, I knew very early on in our marriage that you were going to run something, and I just assumed it'd be somebody's business rather than you thinking you can run it over here.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly right.
Yes, and so it was what I needed, and it made me a better wife, and it made me a better woman, a better mother, and my children understood that, and the boys and I talked about that a lot.
Making them a part of that experience, yeah.
Making them a part of that experience. I had a fun opportunity. You didn't ask about this, but I know one of the things I did struggle with was work-life balance because it's always on your mind. You're a working professional.
Absolutely.
It's always on your mind.
Always.
Our older son had turned 16, and so he had his first job. We happened to have been living here in San Antonio at the time, and he was working at the grocery store here. But Evan was only 14, and you know, they were so close, but he couldn't have a first job yet. Yeah. So I sponsored his first internship for him at 14 years old. I paid him $50 a week for 4 weeks. He had to write his own resume. He had to write his own letter of introduction. I identified certain people at work, at the company, that would be friendly to him, that he could send this to, introducing himself. And he said that his mother was sponsoring an internship for him, and he was looking for any projects or work and so forth, and he would be available to meet with them, you know, whatever times he put on there. And there was a little vacant area in the office, and he was there with the telephone, and he could, you know, here was his number they could call, and he had to put together his own follow-up evaluation after his project so they could give him feedback.
Good.
And you'd be surprised how many people responded. And it was not just out of courtesy to me. Our marketing department was just starting to segment the youth market, and they used him for a lot of focus on that.
Yeah. The one-person focus group, right, to start that out.
Yeah, and I paid him $50 a week.
That's perfect. I love that story. Okay, so I guess where I want to end, especially in this kind of first segment, now that you've completed this law degree, and you were talking about this own personal ceiling, you know, what was that last transition, and you know, what barriers did you overcome, or you know, how did essentially that play out to achieve the level that you ultimately wanted and were able to succeed in?
I was at my retirement. I retired from a position as a board-elected officer of the corporation, so that was excited to be able to matriculate to the highest levels of the organization. I did do regulatory work for the organization. I actually ran a state organization, and I ran the regulatory organization in our Washington, D.C. office, and so the universe worked. It was exciting. It was really tough times. We had really critical issues before our regulators and before the company. Being able to understand administrative law the way that I was able to understand it, having been formally trained in it as a part of my legal studies, gave me a tremendous background and preparation for that. And gave me a great deal of credibility with the many lawyers that I had to engage with in executing on that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it really did work.